on Game Plan.
Fitzpatrick under pressure, flushes out to the right. He has some room. No one is home, and Ryan Fitzpatrick falls forward for the first down.
That's not the type of game that suits us, and that's the type of game we played in years past when we've been a 500 team.
The Saints got more of a wake-up call than they bargained for against the Bucs, and now the Browns come to town.
Man, it's been tough games against these guys.
See how Drew Brees and company match up against Cleveland. We'll break down the tape on Michael Thomas's career day, discuss the state of the Saints, and peek into the fantasy football forecast in the Superdome on Sunday.
From Fox 8 Sports, this is Game Plan, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers, home of the best-selling truck 41 years straight.
So no 16-0. Sorry, not going to happen. But there's still a long way to go in this Saints season, beginning this week against Cleveland. Well, welcome to Game Plan. With Juan Kincaid, I am merely Sean Fazan.
A slap in the face. Marshawn Lattimore said that's all his defensive mates will need to get back on track. They got backhanded by the Bucs, but now it's time to deliver the blow for the Browns.
They did a lot of good things on film last week, and that's the thing, you almost, I mean, you hate the fact that they haven't had a win since, for a while, just because you look at their side of the ball and you're like, man, that's a really good defense. It's they did a lot of good things, and so forget their record. Forget the last time they had a win. I think we look at it as, you try to as much as possible, man. Faceless opponent, we go out, we execute our stuff. Whatever they throw at us, we got to have a plan for, we got to be ready for.
All of a sudden, the Browns feel a lot like the Bucs in that the Saints cannot afford to look past them, Sean.
No, and the truth is this team has never matched up particularly well against the Browns, and the Saints know they must be ready.
Sure, the Cleveland Browns may be a bit of a punchline around the league, but look at their roster, and there's no denying the talent.
Touchdown, Josh Gordon!
Let's start on offense. Tyrod Taylor for now runs the show. Taylor is a capable quarterback, though not spectacular. He was sacked 7 times last week. Still, after getting beat by the feet of Ryan Fitzpatrick in Week 1, the Saints know they have to be prepared for Taylor in Week 2.
Even without us giving up so much last week, we would still had to be very disciplined this week because he's such a good scrambler. But especially since we did that last week, he sees that on film and he's going to be looking for that. So we got to be damn near perfect with our rush lands in our games in order to contain him.
Former LSU star Jarvis Landry was Taylor's main target last week. He caught 7 passes. They also have Josh Gordon and Antonio Callaway.
They're great players. We played Jarvis last year in Miami. Very physical, tough guy. I like how the way he play. I like when they physical, like dogs. He a dog, and I like that about him. Josh Gordon, he's a great receiver. He led the league. What was that, 2012 or something like that?
The defense as a whole appears to be opportunistic, which is pretty common for a Greg Williams-led group. They had 5 takeaways last week, including 2 interceptions by first-round pick Denzel Ward. They also have a young stud at defensive end with Myles Garrett, who appears to be a difference maker off the edge. He had 2 sacks a week ago.
It's an aggressive style. He gets those guys playing hard. They're multiple, meaning they do a lot of things, and they do a lot of things well. They looking at them from last year to this year, they kind of revamped their secondary to draft, Denzel Ward, high pick. And go out and get some free agent guys as well that have really bolstered that secondary. Really good linebacker core, really good front 7. Obviously one of the most elite pass rushers in the league, in Myles Garrett. So, man, they're a formidable defense.
The Browns are 13-4 all-time against the Saints and won their last 2 meetings against them in 2010 and 2014.
It's like Deuce McAllister said last week, you can't win the second game until you win the first, so no overlooking the Browns allowed. But how bad has the Browns' luck at finding a quarterback been through the decades? They've only had 1 quarterback play an entire season since 1999, and that was the first overall pick, Tim Couch, who was drafted that year. Since then, they've gone through the ringer of quarterbacks from Kelly Holcomb to Charlie Fry to Brady Quinn to Kevin Hogan, and not Hogan's Heroes, and a bunch of others sprinkled in. None of them were any good. They drafted Baker Mayfield in the first round this season, but started veteran Tyrod Taylor in the opener against Pittsburgh, which ended in the tie. Taylor was 15 of 40 for 197 yards. He did throw a touchdown, but also a pick. He was sacked 7 times. Head coach Hugh Jackson said the quarterback and everyone around him need to play better.
Not good enough. Not good enough. But I think what I'm also saying in there is not all him. You know, sometimes guys got to be in the right spot. Protection's got to hold up for him. All those things in a passing game makes a difference. So I think we all understand that. So it's not just him. Does he have to do his job better? Yes. But I think everybody around him has to do their job better too.
The Browns have plenty of offensive talent, but it seems like they've always been a good, competent quarterback away from competing and, of course, winning games.
I mean, #1 overall pick, you drafted Baker Mayfield. How long before he gets on the field?
I think it's going to be very, very soon. But a perfect scenario for the Browns would be for Taylor to play well this season, which would buy Coach Jackson some time before they have to turn to Mayfield. Get that kid on the field eventually, but if you don't have to rush him, why should you do it?
Never a dull moment with the Cleveland Browns. Still to come on Game Plan, never has a Twitter handle been so accurate in real life. Up next, I go deep into the tape to explain why teams simply can't guard Mike. And we want you to use the Final Play app to make your voice heard on our app. With a question using the Final Word feature, and tune in to see what our crew has to say about it.
You're watching Game Plan, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers, home of the best-selling truck 41 years straight.
We know the Saints defense struggled, but there were plenty of bright spots in Sunday's loss to Tampa.
And one of the biggest was Michael Thomas. A franchise record 16 catches on the day. I went to the tape and broke down every single one. Catch one from Michael Thomas's day began early in the first quarter on the first drive, and it's a unique route. Thomas sells his patented slant, but when the defender jumps it, he cuts back out towards the sideline and gains 14. Catch two at the 8:33 mark. Thomas runs a similar route. He turns it like a hook, then pivots to the out route and gains 11 yards. Catch three, 5:15 in the first quarter. Thomas runs a simple curl route. Catch number four, his last catch of the quarter, and it was a big one. Lined up on the right side, Thomas slashed through the Bucs defense with an over route. He gained 35 yards. Catch number five, 11:09 in the second quarter. Thomas ran another out route. He would gain 6 yards on the play. His next catch, catch six, was a broken play. His intended route was a 12 and in, but he moves outside with Drew Brees. This was the play Thomas should have had a touchdown. Instead, it was just a 5-yard gain. Catch seven, Thomas worked the underneath well. Lined up in the slot, he beats Levante David on a shallow cross for a 6-yard gain. Catch eight, on the left slot this time, Thomas runs an 8 and in route for a way too easy score with no defenders around him. In the second half, he kept going. Catch nine. Here he is on a deeper out route. That gained 11 yards. His 10th catch was another shallow crosser. This was one of the few times Thomas was stopped short of the sticks. Catch 11 was another hook out concept where he ran 5 yards, curled, then hit the out route. He gained 6 yards on the play. Catch 12, the dig. Lined up on the outside left, he runs 15 yards in a cross. His extra effort, though, proved costly as he was hit from behind and fumbled the ball after a 19-yard gain. Catch 13, another in route, and Thomas uses his hands to fight off the defender to gain 6. Catch 14, yet another in route. Lined up on the right this time, he goes 10 yards and squares it off and finds a nice hole between 3 defenders. Catch 15, the post. Lined up on the left slot, Thomas goes 15 and post, just past the linebacker and right in front of the safety for a 21-yard gain. And finally, catch number 16, yet another shallow cross. This time, though, he slow plays it and goes half speed. The defenders lose him, and he gains 9. As you can see, he dominated, and it's a shame the Saints wasted that effort in a loss, but I think it's safe to say one player you do not have to worry about this season is Michael Thomas.
The thing I've loved about Michael Thomas for so long, he just does his job in practice, and then he performs on the field. Before his career is all said and done, Thomas could end up being one of the best to ever play the position. That's what I believe. But it remains to be seen just how much the Saints will be able to stick to their offensive game plan this Sunday. Against the Bucs, they went pass heavy once they fell behind by a couple of scores. The run game suffered and was mostly ineffective. Our running back, Deuce McAllister, believes they'll have more balance against the Browns.
I think you have to stay committed to it. Obviously, you can't lose a game like you did yesterday because of letting the game get away because you have to score. You want to find and make sure that you have some balance, and I know that's what they went into that game, hoping to achieve. The other piece is if they're able to get Andres Pete back, how much does he change what they can do from an offensive line standpoint? I thought Josh Laribas held his own and did really well, but, having him is going to change what they can do in a running attack.
Again, being able to keep this game from turning into a track meet where they're having to chase on the scoreboard will help the Saints keep to their game plan.
And I think Sean Payton said it best. When they get into those type of games, the track meets, that's usually the result of an 8-8 ball club. Still to come, what is the state of the Saints after their 5th straight season-opening loss, and what solutions can be found on defense to turn that unit around? Josh Katzenstein joins us to discuss.
You're watching Game Plan, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers, home of the best-selling truck 41 years straight.
You're going to be familiar with a lot of the things that they like to do just because it's Greg Williams, but at the same time, you're going to have to be able to go and play. He is going to try to pressure you up the middle. You're going to have to account for Peppers, but you're going to have to account for Myles Garrett as well. You'll see a deep safety. They like to play the deep safety, and they don't want to get anything behind them. They don't want to get beat deep. So, it's being patient. That's what it's going to take.
Saints Hall of Famer Deuce McAllister will be with us Sunday morning at 10 a.m. to preview the game, and Sunday night at 10:30 to wrap it all up. Come Monday, you can catch Deuce at 8 a.m., 5 p.m., and 10:35. All of that right here on Fox 8. Always nice to welcome into Game Plan Josh Katzenstein from NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, their beat writer there, and this is the football team that needs to get a win. They can't seem to win in opening week. Is the team's approach, is that the problem, how they lead up to that game? Do they need to change that at all?
I mean, I think it has to be part of the problem. I mean, I think when you lose 5 openers in a row, you have to assume that part of the problem is with the coaching. And Sean Payton did say after the game that they have to consider what they're asking the guys to do and if they're asking the right guys to do it. And I think that really resonated because, you think normally you give guys time to show the improvement, from week 1 to week 2. But I don't think the Saints are in a position where they can really be too patient. And I don't know where the changes might come, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some lineup changes in week 2.
There's always an unknown going into week 1 because you have this body of work in the preseason. You're not sure if it's real or if it's mirage, and you get to week 1 and you got to adjust on the fly. I don't know where the answer is. I know we've talked about this a lot over the last couple days, but 5 in a row, as I've said many times, it's not an outlier anymore. This is a trend. There's got to be some kind of tweak leading up to that game to get you back on track because you just don't want to start 0-1 because your whole offseason builds to that first game, and to lose 5 in a row like that, I just think it's kind of a letdown.
And the way they lost the game, the defense was just awful. I mean, it was awful up and down the board. That's a bit of a shock, considering we thought that would be one of their better suits this year.
Yeah, and look, I thought they were a defense that kind of looked like they were going to pick up where they left off in 2017 and maybe underestimated Tampa a little bit, but look at those skilled players. I mean, they got a lot of very good players. Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans, Humphries is a good third receiver, Bray, O.J. Howard. I mean, a lot of players. I thought the front 4 really did not play well. I thought the back end didn't play well. I thought the linebackers didn't play well. So, yeah, I absolutely think it was a shock because I thought they were going to pick up, not pick up where they left off, but just do better against Tampa than they did.
I think I was one of the many people that made the foolish mistake of using the Saints defense in my fantasy team. Just assuming, they get Fitzpatrick week 1, they get the Browns in week 2. But I think a couple things we probably overlooked this offseason. First, the pass rush is going to be a work in progress. I mean, Alex Okafor coming back from an Achilles, that's an injury that some guys never are the same player afterwards. And, I mean, it's impressive that he made it back as quickly as he did, but that just happened in November. So it's going to be hard to expect him to be the same guy that he was last year. And then Marcus Davenport, as we knew going into it, wasn't fully up to speed because of the time he missed in the preseason. But the other thing is, I think last year we were all giving them the benefit of a doubt because there were so many rookies playing on the defense, and it was going to take some time to gel. I think this year we saw that the new faces on defense were veteran free agents, guys like Demario Davis, Kurt Coleman, Patrick Robinson, But the fact is, even though they have experience, they still have to find a way to gel and fit in with the guys that are returning. And I think we saw that there was definitely a lack of chemistry and some poor communication.
And Deuce McAllister was saying early in the week that, a lack of discipline, a lack of communication, two of the problems with this football team. I want to talk about the linebacker situation because for me, you go out and get Demario Davis, who is a fantastic middle linebacker, and you don't play him in that position. Why is it taking this team so long to get their linebacking core figured out in the right spots?
I really don't. This is the one question that I just don't have any answers to. I can't explain why they moved Demario Davis from the middle to the weak side after he had an amazing season last year with the Jets playing in the middle. I don't know why they moved Alex Anzalone away from the weak side where he seemed to be playing pretty well to start last year. I don't know why Craig Robertson is the only linebacker who didn't have a shot on Sunday when they were rotating the other four guys.
He was probably the best one in preseason.
Absolutely, and granted, you don't want to rely too much on the evaluation in the preseason, but certainly there are issues, and I think part of it is that they spent so much time in the preseason mixing up the lineups, working to find the best group that, they didn't really have time to build the chemistry. Now, you could argue, certainly, and the Saints will argue, Mike Nolan said this during training camp, that getting those guys to play with each other will help you when there are injuries and everyone has to play with each other. But at some point, you got to get your starters in there and you got to get them right.
But I imagine the Browns have really looked at that tape against the Bucs and seen Fitzpatrick running the ball and thinking, okay, our two quarterbacks can run the ball as well, and maybe better than Fitzpatrick. Might we see both quarterbacks get some playing time this weekend?
I don't think so, just because I think Tyrod right now probably gives them the best chance to win. And I looked this up this week. Tyrod Taylor has only thrown an interception on 1.4% of his passes. Now, granted, it's a small sample size because he was only a starter for 3 years in Buffalo, but I mean, that's a lower rate than Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. So he's a guy that, might not be that accurate, but he doesn't make big mistakes, and he's obviously effective running the ball. And Sheldon Rankin said both Sunday and Wednesday that the Browns, because they have Tyrod Taylor, are probably looking at the tape from week 1 and salivating because they saw that the Saints are susceptible to a running quarterback.
Well, I think he's got a similar to an Alex Smith skill set. Doesn't take a lot of chances, doesn't throw the ball a lot downfield, can run the ball. Maybe not quite as good as Alex Smith, but still, he's not going to make a whole lot of mistakes. But still, when your number 1 overall pick is the Heisman Trophy winner and it's a guy like Baker Mayfield with all that charisma and swag, and if it goes south for Tyrod Taylor, perhaps there's an outside chance. I asked Alex Okafor about this, obviously, on Wednesday, and he said, right now we're preparing for Tyrod Taylor, and if it changes, we'll adjust. But right now, we're going with Taylor. So we'll see. There's always a possibility, maybe a little bit later in the regular season, but perhaps not right now.
All right, real quickly, how bad would it be if this team loses again, 0-2 start, when you got the toughest part of your schedule coming on the back end?
I think it would be really bad. No one thought this would happen. The Saints went all in this offseason with trades for Davenport, and then with the assumption that this is our year, even made a move to secure their backup quarterback spot. So I think 0-2 would not be a good look, especially the emphasis that you put on this roster heading into the season.
Is it too early to call this a must-win game?
No, I don't think so. We've been calling it that for 5 straight years.
Right, yeah, well, and the past 4, they lost, week 2 after losing week 1. I think the big difference this year, between last year is that the schedule gets a lot harder, as you said, Juan, right after this Browns game. You have to go to Atlanta, go to New York, and then ultimately the schedule as a whole is harder because they won the division last year, so they're matching up with the winners of all the other divisions in the NFC, and I think that this is just not a situation that they can afford to go 0-2.
All right, trying to keep the positive side here. That's Josh Katzenstein from NOLA.com and the Times Picayune. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Still to come, which Browns offensive weapons could feast on the Saints' vulnerable defense? Chris Hagan handicaps the fantasy football outlook.
You're watching Game Plan, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers, home of the best-selling truck 41 years straight.
Here's one thing that seems a given. If you start strong, you'll reach the playoffs. It's not a guarantee, but winning early doesn't hurt. Since 1978, 52% of Week 1 winners reach the playoffs, and 31% win the division. Only 23% of the Week 1 losers make the playoffs, while 14% go on to win the division. In 2018, the Saints and Patriots won the divisions despite Week 1 losses. Time now to talk fantasy football, and those rosters, even after Week 1, might need a little bit of tweaking.
Perhaps. In this week's Extra Point, Chris Hagan breaks down how the Saints and Browns matchup could impact your week.
Week 2 of the fantasy football season is already considerably easier to predict than the first primarily because we've seen a broad picture of how each team operates. The Saints, offensively, exceeded what were already high expectations with Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Michael Thomas. In fact, while the Saints' defense was wildly disappointing and cost you points if you started them in Week 1, the offense was a huge beneficiary. Playing from behind for most of the game, the black and gold were forced to dial up play after play built to score on every drive, and couldn't play the conservative run-heavy offense we saw from a year ago. Normally, that's bad news for a running back, but given how involved Kamara is in the passing game, he lit up the scoreboard and accounted for 3 touchdowns along with 9 receptions for 112 yards. In a PPR league, he totaled 43 points and proved just how much the Saints will go to him when they're in a jam. Brees, meanwhile, had his biggest fantasy outing since Week 15 of the 2016 season, throwing for 3 touchdowns, something he only did once in 2017. However, Michael Thomas was the biggest eye-opener, exceeding expectations that were already very high. He set a Saints single-game reception record, hauling in 16 passes for 180 yards and a touchdown. Only Kansas City's Tyreek Hill had a bigger fantasy performance thanks to a punt return for a score. Obviously, all 3 of those players, plus Ted Ginn Jr. as a possible flex, should be starts on your roster this week. As for the visiting Cleveland Browns, until proven otherwise, we have to assume that Saints opponents will have some pretty solid fantasy value. It starts with their receivers, Jarvis Landry, who had a double-digit scoring effort, and Josh Gordon, who found the end zone. And if the Saints don't patch the holes in their secondary, both could once again have some big days. However, I would still be reserved in starting Tyrod Taylor. The Saints played him well last year in Buffalo, and there are undoubtedly better options elsewhere to start at quarterback. Either way, though, as we've talked about, as long as the Saints' defense is down, the fantasy production in these games will be high. So as always in fantasy football, strike while the iron's hot. Reporting for Game Plan, I'm Chris Hagan.
Our coverage doesn't stop here. Lots more football on Fox 8 this week. Friday, we switch to the high school gridiron for Fox 8 Football Friday at 10:35. Sunday morning, wake up with us on Fox 8 Live Tailgate 10 a.m., getting you ready for kickoff at high noon. Our reports begin on Fox 8 News at 9, leading up to the final play at 10:30. After that, you can catch league-wide coverage on NFL Game Day, Prime, from Fox Sports.
And of course, you can always get in touch with us using the Final Word feature on the Final Play app. That will do it for us tonight. Thank you for watching Game Plan. Thanks to everyone here at Fox 8 for their contributions. Our next newscast is at 4:30 in the morning. Good night, everyone.
Buenas noches, Sean. Buenas noches, everybody.
From Fox 8 Sports, this has been Game Plan, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers, home of the best-selling truck 41 years straight.